Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Jamie Underwood, Director of Marketing Communications at Alertus Technologies, and I'll be moderating today's webinar on integrating campus-wide safety highlighting Washington University in St. Louis. We ask that you please hold all questions to the end of the webinar. You can use the chat box to type and submit questions at any point during the presentation, and we'll be sure to come back to those during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. I would now like to welcome today's presenters. We have Blake Robertson, Alertus Technologies CTO, and from Washington University in St. Louis, we have Mark Bagby, Director of Emergency Management, and Matt Arthur, Director of Incident Communication Solutions.
Hey guys.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Good afternoon.
How's it going?
So today we're going to talk about does your emergency notification system look like a jigsaw puzzle? Many of our systems now are multi-systems that are now need to be integrated, and so we're going to talk about what we've done here at Washington University in St. Louis, working with our vendor partners to make it less complicated. So Washington University in St. Louis is a medium-sized research and medical university. We've got 6 campuses spread across 9 jurisdictions in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and we've got about almost 30,000 students and employees at the university. So the problem that we came up with was that over the years we had amassed multiple systems that were all part of emergency communications, but they're all disparate. You had to have logins for each of them. And by doing a hazard vulnerability analysis with our dispatchers, we determined it'd take about 30 minutes for them to log in each system, display the message, send it out, and that was just way too long when life safety was involved.
Agreed.
So this is kind of what our system looked like way back when. It was, all these different disparate systems: email, text, voice, outdoor sirens, websites, social media. And what we did is, first after we did the hazard vulnerability assessment, we sat down and knocked down the policy. What was it that we wanted to do? What was the end goal? So we talked about, who do we need to reach and how? Students receive messages in different ways than, let's say, older faculty members. So we had to take that into account. We had to think about who is authorized to issue the message. So we have about 11 administrators that are authorized, and about 80 other users that can then push the button if one of those 11 people authorize the message. We talked about who has the ability to set off the system. So we have it down to dispatchers in our police department, folks in our public affairs office, information systems technology, emergency management, etc. And then we decided, how are we going to use the system? So first, we've got the Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2008 that requires us to alert campuses, the campus population, anytime there is an immediate threat to life safety. So that's things like in the Midwest, tornadoes, violence such as a shooter on campus, and other incidents. Then we had to think about who owns the system. So between information systems and technology and emergency management, we own the program together. And then we looked at what technologies do we have or want to use and integrate. So we looked at those things in the past that we had, but then we also looked forward to and involve the students and faculty and staff to say, how do you want to be alerted in an emergency? And we looked at those, how we could integrate those under one system. And so for us, the solution was working with our vendor partners to come up with a centralized dashboard. We nicknamed it the Easy Button, and that came to us via Alertus. So we were able to put all those puzzle pieces together under one dashboard instead of having to go through all those disparate systems.
So, thanks, Mark. Actually, before I go to that slide, I want to go back here. The important thing to recognize is that we are using Alertus as that central umbrella. That's the system by which we can access digital signage, voice alarm, indoor speakers, Everbridge, which is, by the way, Everbridge is our we send out a message to them and they send it back in text and email. Desktop pop-ups, etc. So that's the important part, right? That's why you're here. You want to see how are we integrating those. So Mark talked about policy, and you know, I'm the technical side of things, so I don't really deal in policy, but I know enough to sort of figure out that we have to have this stuff understood from a policy perspective before I, the technical person, can get involved. And I just sort of, for my own sanity, I sort of put together this matrix, and you can see it's Matt's Washington University Emergency Communications Learning Matrix. There's nothing official about it, but if you look across the top, you know, you have to have that executive authorization. So we do actually have a letter from the chancellor giving, it's a memorandum of understanding that gives the crisis management team the operational responsibility during an incident, which means, you know, we don't have to check with the executive leadership for many things. One of the examples I give is that if there's a winter storm, right, the crisis management team can recommend to the executive leadership to cancel school, but that's still the executive leadership's job. What our job is, as the crisis management team, is to get the sidewalks clean, get the buildings open, make sure they're safe, etc. So operationally, we can operate without having to check. That's imperative, right? As you can see, the third row down, the operational authority, Mark mentioned that. The incident assessment team, which is made up of these folks from these different groups, and then the rest of it talks about sort of talks about from a flow from left to right. So the incident timeline, you know, the incident happens, and then the crisis management team gets control of it, and then there's time until the incident ends. And the incident types, I've sort of just, this is me saying, hey, we have three basic types of incidents. We have an HEOA, a Higher Education Opportunity Act defined Save Lives Now incident. That's legislatively and regulatorily defined for us. And then we just have, but then we have emergencies. And then we have incidents that are not an emergency or Save Lives Now, but they still require some members of the crisis management team to get involved. And you can see the examples I gave were the quote from the HOA, immediate threat to the health or safety of students or staff. The key thing I will say here, and Mark, feel free to chime in, but is that basically says you got to have a plan. And I will tell you, if you're going to have a plan, you got to make sure that if you have an incident, you initiate the plan. Don't have a plan and not use it, or you're going to be even worse off than you are without a plan. But an example of an emergency would be hazardous material spill, a fire, etc. And then an informational type of incident we talked about, like a couple of years ago, we had a meningitis episode. In that case, again, we had to have members of the crisis management team, but we weren't from a timing perspective. So a Save Lives Now emergency, we have to have something out within an appropriate amount of time, which is basically 15 minutes, give or take. The emergency, you have more time. You can take 45 minutes or whatever the right. There is no, you know, the clock isn't ticking as threateningly as it does for the Save Lives Now emergency. And of course, the informational one, you figure out what you're going to do, and then you make sure you get the word out. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the rest of this. The alert authorization, that just talks about whether things are pre-approved. And Mark, we'll talk about that later. We have some preset alerts that are pre-approved ahead of time that just take the authority of one of those authorized 8, although I think that's now, what, Mark, like 11? Yeah, authorized, although it doesn't sound as good to say authorized 11, authorized 8. But and then again, like you said, like I said, once you get in that third column under the informational, at that point, public affairs really is running the information show. And if they want to use some of our tools, that's great. I show responsibility, and then down at the bottom, we talk about modes of communication. So in a Save Lives Now, we're going to use every available system to get the word out. In an emergency, there was a decision made by the policymakers that we're going to alert everybody on the campus. As you recall, we have 6 campuses. So alert everybody with everything we got on that campus, but we're going to inform the other campuses. and then the incident, then the informational one that sort of deals with whatever public affairs sort of feels like is the proper way to get the information out. Again, this is just sort of a chart that helps me to think about flow and to think about how we can define, how we're defining when stuff's used and who's authorized to use it and why. Anyway, so how we did it. You can see we have a project timeline that we sort of talked about, and even before that, that September October RFP, we were like everybody else. When Virginia Tech happened, we started looking at how would we react to that. And luckily, actually, one of our former telecom manager had actually bought into a system called ClearText, which we were thinking more to use for like results of the football game or something, but then rapidly figured out we could use it for emergency. So we had something in place. Anyway, Mark's entrance into this picture really helped us define what we needed to do and how to move to it. As you can see, we narrowed it to 2 finalists, and I will tell you that the finalists were really a group that was going to come in and build a turnkey box, which meant if we wanted to make any changes to it later, we had to bring them back and build more, or alert us, which we had worked with Blake. I'd worked with Blake for many years, just talking to him about what it is his system did and what it is we thought what I thought it should do, which is this umbrella system. And the advantage we found, or the advantage I felt like with Alertus, is with Alertus it was a partnership. It was a collaborative venture between Alertus and Washington University to get it right for us, but also not make it too narrowly defined so that it would not be applicable to everyone else at other campuses. And I think we've achieved that. You can see the specs, but basically we went live. Oh, there we go. More timeline. We went live September 2000, October 11th, right? Oh, January 2012. But we were ready in the fall of 11. And again, this is just a slice in time at this point. Mark and I are very adamant about the idea that as we move forward, we're always looking at new technologies and how do we wrap that into the Alert Us bubble. Okay, so activation. When we actually have an alert, we created 3 levels of user access, as it says. The preset, which we talked about before, that is we feel like there's any save lives now emergency is going to, by definition, come through Washington University Police Department or the Medical School Protective Services, and so we were able to say, let's have these pre-approved messages that once the someone of authority, a sergeant, an officer, whatever, and it has it built into their protocol. So shooter on campus protocol. Step 1, send officers out. Step 2, alert so-and-so. Step 3, send off preset alert. Step 4, blah, blah. And that's the key for us is we work with them and we got it built in, but we had to make it such that the dispatchers didn't have to think about it. They just logged in, hit the drop-down menu, picked from one of half a dozen menu items, and then clicked go. That's it. They're done. The second level is a customized, and that's really saying, hey, we have templates that we have set up, and so we have a shooter on campus template, and we have one that the person who has access to these customized. So in the police department setting, it would be that officer, that sergeant on duty, sort of a layer 2. He or she would be able to go in and edit that to give more specifics. So instead of the preset, which is just shooter on this campus, Danforth campus, or medical school campus, this would actually say shooter in this building on this campus, which would give. Now our idea is if we have to use that preset, that customized alert will be coming along within another 15 minutes or so. So we have specific information going out. In addition to those templates, of course, the customized, they can just create their own. And then our third level is administrative, and that's limited to just Mark and I and a couple other people.
Just want to jump in. I think it was a really good way you guys have structured it. I mean, essentially, just in summary, they have these presets, and you get those messages out within what, 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
30 seconds.
Seconds, right? So it's just immediate. They come in, they have these things pre-approved, they send them out, and then from there they get more detailed, and they bring in other as to get the other stakeholders involved.
Yeah, and like Blake said, the key thing for us is we like for, if there's a shooter, a violence on campus, that we use the customized. We would like the first message to go out to say, shooter on this campus in this building. But we recognize that sometimes events would preclude that from that sergeant or that officer on duty from in charge from having the time to do that right away.
Absolutely.
So that's why we created the presets. All right. So activation, again, here is the basic. Actually, this is an old version. I have to say that the alerts just came out with their new interface, the new version, and we haven't updated our slides. So I think we're on version, I don't know what it is, but so if yours looks a little bit different, that's okay. But the menus items are going to be the same. So here's the preset, and like I said, we just have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 threat to safeties, and we have the tornado warnings, and then of course the all clear. Now the all clear, we made up our mind early on. The only time we would issue an all clear is if we had issued a threat to safety. We are not meteorologists. We will not issue, if we can help it, weather warnings. We have those presets for the tornado warnings, but that's only if the automated system for some reason fails. Here's this tells you what it looks like once you've clicked a particular one. In this one, it was the Danforth threat to safety on Danforth. So as a dispatcher, you click it, it takes you to here, you review it real quick just to make sure that's the one. The key part is which one is it? It's the Danforth campus. You don't want to choose the medical school campus if the threat is really on the Danforth campus. So once you see that, basically all we're asking them to do is then click send.
And then, as Matt said earlier, we have the customized availability for the next level up to sergeants and above. And so this is just what that looks like. So you can enter customized text, or where it says pre-scripted message with a drop-down, it has a series of drop-down messages, which we'll show you in a second. You can choose then what devices you want it to go off, how long, and all that.
So just to give a little context, so the Alertus system, we actually have multiple dispatch modes. So the first one they showed you was our preset mode, and that's where you're just selecting an actual preset scenario. Then we also have the second mode, which is a custom, which gives you more access to specify details.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. So this one shows one of our templates. So we've already sat down while we're all cool, calm, and collected, and thought about what do we want to say. We take into account, for text messages versus emails on how many characters we want it to be. But in this case, we've pre-scripted the message, and all that the officer, sergeant, or other has to do is then delete that insert campus name and put the campus or the building number. We've also done some automated activations. So for severe weather, just tornado warnings to meet our HEOA obligation, we have Alertus's Threat Watcher program look at the National Weather Service feed looking for keywords such as St. Louis County and tornado warning. And that comes in through a CAP alert, and if that criteria is true, then it launches the system. If it's false, like if it says for Monroe County or another county, then it just ignores it. So this is what the custom event trigger looks like for that automation. The nice thing is it's configurable for whatever you want. So you can search on keywords. You can have it do different actions. So for us, if it's a severe thunderstorm warning or a flood warning, we have that just go out via email to myself and the police chief and a few others as just kind of a, hey, heads up, here's some severe weather. But if it's a tornado, then it launches our whole system. And this is just a confirmation that once something goes out, you get a confirmation so you can see, and it lists, here's what the warning is, here's the different ways it's going out, and for how long. For weather, we have it go for 15 minutes. For other things like a shooter on campus, we have it go out for 30 minutes.
and this is actually as part of the process. Once you've set it up, and then you apply that to a particular preset alert. In this for the HOA for the weather, we go through this window before we actually set it up. Once we go through that window, we okay it, then it will use those settings.
Yeah, and so how we did this, again, getting back to the policy, we set the policy up ahead of time to then make sure, here's what we wanted to do, and then working with Alertus, they helped us make sure that the system can then do what we wanted to do. So for immediate threat to life safeties, again, the dispatchers have that ability to go in and select that preset message, boom, it's out the door in 30 seconds or less. For tornado warnings for St. Louis City, St. Louis County, it automatically goes out. And then this is just kind of a hierarchy of the system. So, whether it's a manual activation, a dispatcher, an administrator going into the system, or if it's automatic through that threat watcher feed, either way, it feeds into Alertus and launches these different modalities. So for the personal, we use Everbridge to send text messages, voice calls, and emails. We have 3 outdoor warning Wayland sirens that are tied to the county, but we can set them off as well, and that's through a memo of understanding with the county. And then we have multiple indoor alerts. So we have the alert beacons, desktop pop-ups, cable TV override, digital signage override, indoor public address systems, and voice over fire alarm. So a few integration methods. Here's 3 of the main ways on how you can tie different systems together. So the first is a vendor-specific API. The nice thing is this has the tightest control and integration. It's the fastest to push data. But a con is you have to work with those different vendors in order to make them work together. Sometimes you get vendors that don't want to work together. Other times, it may be on the roadmap, but maybe 6 months down the road. So you have to take that into consideration. The second is CAP, Common Alerting Protocol. This came out, I think, around 2008. It's an open standard, which is nice. So any of the vendors or universities can go grab that code and work it into their system. And it's a good way for different organizations to talk and share that information. We get that National Weather Service feed through CAP. But the problem is you don't have a lot of control over it. There's no standard on how it's used and transferred. And then the final is RSS feeds. They're pretty widespread, and you can get newspaper and other feeds to RSS into your inbox. But it's slower because the information's pulled, and it's less secure, so you have to think about that from a security standpoint.
Blake, were you going to say something?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, that previous slide, he's just basically showing the 3 main ways that different systems interact, and that, the whole point of this webinar is how to make your systems kind of work together seamlessly. And so these are the 3 key components you should be looking at when you're evaluating vendors. To what degree they have support for each of these, because you'll need each of them in order to have a kind of one-step activation system.
Which is ultimately where we want it to be and where we are at. So this is just basically talking about the first one over here, the vendor-specific API, where we create a scenario basically in Everbridge, and from Alertus we can call up that scenario and then have Everbridge send it out. It's pretty straightforward. We actually just upgraded to Everbridge Mass Notification, so the nice part was pretty much the API continued to work just the way we just had to repoint it at the Mass Notification as opposed to the Aware implementation.
Well, technically we had to implement a completely new API, but as far as you're concerned, yes, it was very simple.
Yeah, but it's all about me, Blake. So
yeah, no, it's absolutely. That's the way it should be.
All right, digital signage. Again, this is one that we're working with 4 Winds. This one we've got in the experimental stage. We've been sort of testing, and our plan is to implement. Of course, we've had that plan to implement it, and it's not been alert us. Trust me, it's Four Winds. But Four Winds is just our enterprise campus digital signage. There are probably other digital signage groups out there. That was the one that we set up on. We just think it's important so that the key, and Mark talked about it, was getting the message out as quickly as possible to as many modes of communication as possible. I always tell people that if one person in the office gets it and he or she runs out screaming "shooter" in the building, that's an effective mode of communication.
Yeah, real quick on the digital signage. So one thing that we did is the university had a campus standard so that digital signage all uses the same software to run that. The advantage of that is the end users, they still get to control their digital signboards, but as a whole, on the backside, we can then use those signs in an emergency to post that emergency message.
Yeah, it's just basically we tell each of the endpoint signs to look at an emergency channel, and if there's nothing out there, it doesn't do anything. If there is, then it has a preset template that puts up the text of the message that's coming from Alert Us for the preset period of time. Our website. This is our emergency website, and I will tell you that almost all of our information tries to drive people to this website. We want people to go here, and you can see where it says no emergency. That's where the RSS feed goes. So that what will happen is if there's an alert, that will turn red, and the feed itself will show the message. What we wanted to make sure is if there's a shooter on campus, and we tell people, shooter on Danforth campus, go to emergency.worcester.edu for more information. When they go there, that message is there, which is what the RSS feed does. And then we work with, of course, any new Alert Us alerts that we send out would get posted there. But then hopefully within under 30 minutes, the public affairs folks are up there. Now they're logging this information, so you'll be able to scroll through from latest to earliest to see the progress, so that you can understand what's been going on. Now this is interesting because this is a website that's on our campus. So we had actually an accidental alert that showed us that our website couldn't handle. It never died, but it sure churned along pretty slowly, and basically caused a number of people to keep hitting reload, which was causing even more problems. So what we did is we worked with our server folks, and we set up this basic model that shows that far to the right, that's our master server. That's the website itself. Any changes, the RSS feed goes to that server, and then that server feeds it out to the two cache servers. The two cache servers are connecting to two different load balancers, and that's what everybody goes through. Everybody comes in, they hit those load balancers, which is pulling data from those cache servers, which I think it's every 60 seconds pulls a fresh view from the master server. So anything that you saw here is going to, you come to it, is going to be cached for less than no more than 60 seconds. It comes here. We went from where we were able to do just a couple hundred per second to where we're up in the, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 requests per second, and we're still in a safe zone. So that means we feel pretty comfortable here.
So let's talk about voice for a minute. Many of us may have indoor public address, voice over fire alarm, etc. And so all that's voice generated. Now, if you have live voice, that can be great because you can customize the information, give very specific information. But the problem with that is, one, somebody has to have a microphone at the time of the emergency. If it's your dispatch center, they're receiving calls, the adrenaline's pumping because of the emergency. So you have a lack of consistency because they may be talking very fast, you can't understand them. So a lot of people think, okay, let's go pre-recorded. We do that with our outdoor warning sirens. It's great because, again, somebody's cool, calm, and collected. They're probably in a recording studio. They have it written out what they want to say. But the problem with that is you can't then customize that when you need it in an emergency. So that kind of prevents your automation when you want to change something. So we find one of the best is text-to-speech. And if you have a good text-to-speech generator, you can type whatever you want ahead of time or on the fly and convert that into live voice.
Hey, Blake, does Alertus have a good text-to-speech generator?
It's the best. Developed specifically for
Absolutely.
emergency notifications. Yep. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. The other thing that one advantage that we found with Alertus is a lot of our buildings are named after donors, and some donors have difficult names to say, and they're not phonetic. A lot of your text-to-speech generators will make that word sound very strange. So like we have a Lean Hall, which is spelled L-I-E-N. With the generator, it sounds like Lien Hall. But we're able to work with Alertus and pre-program those ahead of time, so if somebody types that in, it sounds correct.
Yeah, so just to back up one step. So if you recall, they have two methods of activating alerts. So they have the manual method, and then they have that automated method, which is actually getting alerts from, like, say, a NOAA weather feed. So a pre-recorded message would basically prevent that automation, because you can't automatically select a pre-recorded message based on some, like, programmatically determine which message to display based on the contents of that weather feed. So I think that's the real key here is in order to enable this this very simple activation process where we're getting alerts from multiple different methods, whether it's manual, a preset, or from a weather feed in general, it's able to actually activate with a synthesized message which is completely accurate and customized for that situation.
So here's how we control our outdoor sirens. So our county and St. Louis City also, they both use Wayland sirens, and we had kind of a dead zone on campus. So we bought 3 sirens, and through an MOU, the county agreed that we could tap into their system. They set off our sirens for weather alerts, but for other things like a shooter on campus or a hazmat spill, we wanted that control that we could still send out a message through that.
Or our twice a year testing.
Correct. Yeah. When we test our system twice a year, we wanted to be able to send a test message so that we didn't cause pandemonium on campus or in the neighborhoods right off campus. The software that originally came with the sirens had a costly licensing fee, and we couldn't do a whole lot with it. But by getting Alertus involved, they talked with the Wayland engineers, and they found a way to tap into it so that we can control it through a text-to-speech device. And now we can do text-to-speech instead of before it was all pre-recorded voice.
So essentially what's happening there is that text-to-speech device is essentially outputting like an audio, line-level audio output, which is going into the siren controller to be transmitted. So so essentially it's the Alertus, the product is what we make, and that has the audio output that connects into the existing siren controller. So that was something they already had in place, didn't need to purchase. And then one other really kind of, I guess, the neat story we had with Wheelan is this was actually our first outdoor siren deployment. One of the issues they raised was, well, no, if you're doing an outdoor siren, you need to actually put pauses in between in the message, because essentially what happens is your message is going to be reverberating off the buildings and create this echo. So you actually need to insert phrases, so it's sort of like, this is a test of the Washington. And so those pauses is when that reverberation or that echo is occurring off of the buildings. And so that's important so it's still, people can still understand the message. So our technology can be adapted for outdoor uses as well to insert those phrases automatically.
So one cool thing, since 2010, NFPA 72 Chapter 24 finally allows us to tie into fire alarm public address systems to tie our mass notification into it.
Hey, Mark, what does NFPA stand for?
National Fire Protection Association.
That's for all you technical people out there who, like me, don't know what those things are. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a standard, it's not a code, but some cities or states have adopted that. So the nice thing is, it's a standard that's out there written that people can follow. Some people do have to follow, But the important thing here is, hey, if you're already putting in a voice over fire alarm system, why not use that technology to your advantage instead of putting in a separate PA system in the building? So we've got a mixture of, in some of the older buildings, we have just regular standard indoor public address system. So again, kind of like the Siren, we just tap into that mixer amplifier with a text-to-speech device, and now we can use that existing technology instead of putting more money into it to blast a voice message across that whole building. And then for voice over fire alarm, very similar. You're using the text-to-speech module to tie into the fire alarm control panel, and then all those speakers on the voice over fire alarm system we're turning into a public address system. The other nice thing about using the fire alarm system is it's already required by code to be battery backed up. It's got a second set of wires going so that if something were to get cut accidentally or lose power, we can do that. And then here's just another excerpt from the 2010 code. It also requires that you need to have visual notification, so the Alertus beacon does that. We have a number of deaf and sight impaired students and employees, so this device helps us meet some of those ADA requirements with the visual notification and the voice and sound.
Okay, we're going to go through sort of some other modes of communication. These are the alert beacons that you actually get from Alertus. We are paying them for something, believe it or not. And as you can see, there's a picture down in the right-hand corner. We have them various locations in various buildings. We try to think in place in terms of where would they give us the biggest bang for the buck. So this right here is in our library, our main library building. I think we have 2 or 3 in the main library, and one of them actually pushes the PA system in the library, so it serves dual purpose. You can see all the specs here. I don't go into that. You can read that as well as I can. Computer pop-ups, desktop pop-ups. Let me tell you what, this has been amazing. We put those out to all the technology folks who now, for their computer labs or for their staff and faculty, they put it on their builds now for new computers, and it sits there and it pops up. We have, I think, close to 10,000 just in the last couple of years we've done this. Close to 10,000 pop-ups that are out there. This was an alert that took place in April of 2011. So not too long after we actually implemented the system. I was in Indianapolis. There was a tornado warning in St. Louis. I got the pop-up on my computer here because I was VPN back in, but I got all the other messages. And a student took this picture and then tweeted it out. And Blake found it, and I talked to the student, and he said he'd be happy for us to use it. But we thought it was just great, this guy saying, hey, look, all the computers in the engineering department just switched to this. How cool is that, right? So we thought that was as positive a reinforcement as we could ask for. Cable TV, we decided early on, I did not want to go with a standard, and Blake can tell you what that is, but with a standard where we would take over the bottom part of the screen, mostly because I could only do it on the standard definition side. I couldn't do it on the HD side way back when. And so what I wanted was, I just wanted to take over the entire system. HD ingested system, we have 4 or 5 channels that we can ingest local events on campus, or on air, whatever the thing is. I just want it wiped out and pushed our alert. So Blake actually helped us figure out how to do that with the video and contact closure. And then the one thing we did decide is we're going to limit it to 3 minutes, because if it's a weather alert, we want people to be able to turn to the local weather and see how it's affecting them. So we didn't want to have the cable TV head end overriding it.
I could go back to that last slide. So yeah, a couple important things to point out for those of you who are interested in cable TV. So it's very cost-effective to do it for analog channels. It's very easy. It's more or less just like one piece of hardware which can override all the different analog channels on campus. The digital channels are a little bit more complicated, so it depends on the encoders, which your campus probably already has. Some of the cheaper brands, they do not have an EAS input, and that in those cases, all those encoders would have to be replaced. But most of the newer ones now do have an EAS, or emergency alert system input, which can be derived, and then it's very cost effective for that. So it's really to determine whether or not doing cable TV is going to be feasible. It's more of a looking at what encoder models you guys have, and we can kind of guide you as to how much that would cost to do.
Yeah, and I will emphasize that got worked out because of, again, a collaborative effort between our cable TV provider, which is Campus Televideo, and Alertus. I mean, they worked very well hand in hand, and that goes back to a vendor partnership with the people who are providing these services. Our cable TV service, that was another one that I worked with Jerry Barnes from Falls Earth for many years before we actually bought into their system. And then when Falls Earth merged with Campus Televideo, we got that same level of service. So having Blake and Jerry and those guys work this out was no big deal.
And the other thing there about the durations, I mean, that was another little slight complication, is that your alert system needs to be able to support that. So, I mean, we have messages going out to the cable TV system for only 3 minutes, but for, say, your pop-ups or your alert beacons or your indoor PA systems, they go on for different durations. So your system that drives less has to be able to accommodate the different durations for each modality.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to kind of start wrapping up, so some of our secrets to a single step that we encountered. First thing is take your time to evaluate the different vendors and select a dashboard that's going to work for you, that was actually designed for emergency notification. There's a lot out there through fire alarm companies and different vendors that they weren't designed for emergency communications, but they're touting now that they are for emergency communications. So just make sure you check things out. Ask for demos, ask for some time to pilot and look at them to make sure they're going to work for you. Select vendors that focus on interoperable methods, so using APIs, CAP, and RSS feeds. Text is always going to be your lowest common denominator. Text goes out the fastest, so you want to make sure you include that towards the top of your modalities. You want to think about the system having the ability for different alert modalities and for different alert duration, as Blake just said. For our Sirens, for our PA systems, cable TV, it's less than 3 minutes, so we don't burn out the amplifiers and speakers. But for our beacons and desktop, we can do the full 15 or 30 minutes if we need to. Mm-hmm. And then remember, test your system at least once a year. It's federal law. It's part of HUOA. You have to do a test of your system at least once a year. This is just a high-level diagram of how complicated your system can be.
This is Blake's slide. He wanted to show how smart he was.
Oh, yeah. I love that slide. No, but one thing I did want to mention, just if you go back 2 slides, when we're talking about the dashboard designed for emergency notification alert profiles, I mean, their system does a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different systems that the alert system is activating for them, but yet we kind of hit all that complexity when in the earlier slides when we were showing the manual activation methods. You didn't see them specifying all these different options at that time. They weren't picking, okay, this alert goes out to cable TV, this alert goes out to outdoor PA to outdoor Sirens. So really what we're doing is it's all about pre-configuration, having that ability to pre-configure these scenarios. It's something we call alert profiles. And so they have scenarios for announcement type alerts versus urgent alerts and life safety alerts.
I will add that we also made a decision early on, and you might have noted from my matrix, is that we don't use this system for anything short of an emergency, a true emergency, or a test. We don't use it for crime alerts. We don't use it for a lot of the things that other campuses might either use their emergency notification system for or are considering it. We just felt like we want people to know when they got this, something was going on, or again, it was a test that we publicized well ahead of time, so that nobody's caught off guard.
So a couple of problems we encountered that hopefully we can help you avoid. Since we are academic, we always can have issues with faculty. So we did have some problems getting permission to place devices in some classrooms. The two common things we got, it would disrupt academic learning if it goes off, or it'll go off all the time. Well, duh, that's what the system's designed for. It's designed to save lives now.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So one thing that I had to do, the main thing about it going off all the time was about the tornado warnings. So I reached back to, while they're not a vendor, they're a partner, the National Weather Service, and said, hey, how many tornado warnings have we had in the past 4 years? And when I had that data, I could go back to faculty and say, hey, over 4 years, it only would have went off 6 times. Now, how is that going to go off too many times?
During 6 times during class times when class could be in session, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing that we did right was limiting access to the system based on job function. So using the preset versus custom. The preset again is for dispatchers, custom is for the higher level. And then one other thing, for system security, we went to LDAP, which is what we call our Wustel key or single sign-on. The nice thing with that is I've got over 90 users of the system that have various levels of access to the system. By tying it to our Wustel key, if they get terminated or moved to a different department, it automatically cuts off their access once that is done in our HR system. So now that allows me not having to bug all these different departments on a weekly basis to see if all these different people are still here in that position and need access to the system.
I think the other smart thing we did was we have a test server as well as a production server, and all these people, they have to, before they are allowed to have access to the production server, they have to go on, have paperwork filled out that has to get approved up through the Vice Chancellor for Operations, and then they get put in, and then they have to go through testing, e-learning training that Mark's group has put together. They have to pass it. Once they passed it, then we give them access on the production server, and then they have to get certified once a year that they've gone through that. So it's not just like a one-time they're on and we forget about them. We wanted to throw this in here because we do feel like we are speaking from some level of expertise. As you can see, we've taken home a couple of national awards. One was from Shima. For the, as you can see, it's the 2012 Solutions at Work, and one is from Akuta, the 2013 Institutional Excellence Award. These are both for our areas pretty prestigious and high-level awards. We had to go through a fairly rigorous panel and choosing and all that kind of stuff. I know that I did the work on the Akuta one, and that was we had to get everybody from the chancellor on down to participate in that process, and it was a fairly lengthy process. So we felt pretty good about the award. The other part that we want to point out was that this is not something that Blake and Mark and I did unto ourselves. That we counted, there were over 85 different Washington University and St. Louis personnel that were involved with just the installation. Everybody from these different committees and teams to different departments. Certainly, facilities is a huge player in this process. We already talked about the police department, protective services, and then of course the information services group from both the medical school and our main campus. Okay, Jamie, that sort of wraps it up. We're now, if you have any questions that you want to throw at us, we're ready to go.
Thanks, Matt. So the floor is now open for Q&A. If you'd like to submit a question, just type it into the chat field and we'll address it with Matt, Mark, and Blake right now. One thing I wanted to mention very quickly before we get into the Q&A is that we are recording this webinar, so if anyone's interested in a link to the video recording, all you have to do is email marketing@alertus.com. I was also going to say, if you would like copies of the slides, we can also send those to you as well. So again, that's marketing@alertus.com. So we'll open up the floor to some questions. I see we have a couple already that came in during the presentation. The first question is going back to the implementation timeline. So Matt and Mark, you guys were talking about sort of the process that you went through, and you mentioned that you were considering a couple of different vendors. The question is, who was the other finalist when you were going through that process?
I believe it is called Alerting Solutions that has now merged with Ad Hoc.
And you have to remember too, especially back then, I often tell this story, right? That we knew what we wanted, but we also knew that nobody out there offered that umbrella interface that would be able to tie all these disparate systems together. We knew that. The closest that anyone came was, again, that the company Mark mentioned, who had built a unique standalone box for Florida State. I think Florida State was.
No, it's for a power plant out in California.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but they, and when we went through the process, we got a lot of interesting bids from people who did the Everbridge type service, where you send them a message and they send it back. Or Rave is another company that we have used in the past. But and then those companies were just starting to get into the process where they would then be able to take APIs and build some of that umbrella. But there was nobody out there, nobody at all. And so it came down to, like I said, it came down to those two situations. One, either have somebody build it specifically to our standards, but then we're stuck. That's what we have. Anytime you needed to have something change, we had to go back and they had to build that piece too. Or again, working with Alertus, who was really, truly, in my mind, the first company to come along and understand the breadth of that decision. The story I always tell is Blake was in New Orleans for an Akuta seminar with me, and we're walking down Bourbon Street one night, and I'm having that discussion. I'm saying, Blake, this is the holy grail for me, is this one product that I put everything underneath so that my dispatchers don't have to make up their mind or try to remember this system, then do this system, then do that system. Like Mark pointed out, it would have taken 30 minutes almost to do all those disparate systems by the same person.
Yeah, I mean, things have gotten so much better in the last couple of years too. I mean, we're talking more about just like the APIs in general. A lot of systems have opened up a lot more and kind of made this much more possible. I think when we were originally talking, most vendors didn't even have an open API that we could even consume to make this reality. So I'm very pleased with that.
I will say this because I do pay attention to this sort of market a lot, and there's still, the companies are better, and again, companies like Everbridge or Rave or whomever, they have the functionality to be able to build to integrate other companies like Alertus into them, but I still have yet to find one that has that complete coverage for all the disparate systems that we have right now. I still maintain that right now Alertus is the only company out there that would be able to still functionally do what we want it to do, without a lot of overhead and specialty one-time, one-off type stuff. I think that's kind of the good part. That the good part I feel about with Alertus is that there's not a whole lot that we're doing that's caused Alertus to go down a tunnel that only applies to Washington University. What they're doing for us, they've applied across the board, so that when we come back and they upgrade their software, we don't have to have special software upgrades because ours is so different than everybody else's. Anyway, that's a long answer. Sorry, Jamie.
No problem. Next question is concerning partners and integration. So you're talking a little bit during the presentation about Everbridge. So the question is Everbridge similar to Rave?
Yeah, so there's a lot of mass communication companies. So you've got Everbridge, you've got Rave, you've got OmniAlert, E2 Campus. They're very similar. They do the same thing. They get down to that personal communication of text message, email, or voice calls. The one thing that we've used Everbridge for I think 6-7 years now, and their system complements Alertus so that we can use the Alertus dashboard to send out the original message, but then it pushes it to Everbridge. And if for some reason, if our Alertus server were to go down, our data center went down, we still have that backup of tying into Everbridge to still get a message out to the people, just not through every modality.
And specific to that question, yes, Rave can do all the same things as it applies to Alertus as Everbridge does. They functionally do the same thing. We chose we did a bake-off. We went through the whole process not too long ago, and the decision at the university level was to go with Everbridge, but Rave was right there, and there was nothing that disqualified them from being a finalist in that process.
So our next question concerns the mobile phone app. Question is, do the students upon entering school, as they're going through orientation, have an opt-in via cell phone policy that they sign off to enroll for emergency notifications?
Yeah, so when Matt talked about earlier, 2007, when we had the clear text, we had an opt-in policy. We only had about 10% people opt in, and we had people constantly, what's my password, what's my login? So after that, we decided we need to move to an opt-out policy. So for all employees, all students, they're automatically put into the system. We use our HR system and our student information system as a system of record. And as they put information into those two systems, we then pull that into Everbridge for communication methods. Now we're getting ready to, here in about a week, at the present moment, if you opt out of everything. In about a week, any university-owned devices such as campus phone, email, they will no longer be able to opt out of. They'll only be able to opt out of personal devices such as cell phone and home phone. And from that, we have over a 99% compliance rate.
Great. The next question concerns weather-related emergency notifications. How do you manage tornado warnings that will not impact your campuses?
Right. So we have 6 campuses spread out all over the county. So we decided early on, if the message was a tornado warning for St. Louis County, we were going to send it out, and we are still using that. Unfortunately, there are situations where NOAA will send out an update to a tornado warning, and that gets sent out. And then if we have, like we had a year ago or last April, I don't remember what it was, but we basically had 2 tornadoes, one on the north side of the county and one on the south side of the county. So we had people, were receiving 7, 8, 9 alerts within an hour, hour and a half period. We say there was a lot of grumbling, but the truth be told, out of 30,000 people that received these messages, we got less than 0.5% or 0.25% of the total population who even, complained or replied. So we had a very small number when you look at the totality. That being said, we are working with Alertus because NOAA is now issuing polygon alerts, so that we can draw a polygon of a 10-mile radius around the center of each of our 6 campuses, and we can say only send out the alert if one of these 6 campuses is affected. That way, if there's a tornado that goes through the northernmost part of the county or the southernmost part and doesn't come within that 10-mile polygon of that particular campus, of a particular campus, then we would avoid that alert. So yeah, it's better than nothing. And again, our emphasis is, hey, this is just another method to tell you there's a tornado that could be affecting you. You probably want to go look and find out more information. The other thing that we've really stressed is that, folks, when you're at home, nobody tells you when it's time to go to the basement because there's a tornado out there. You have to make that decision, and so we try to really emphasize that personal responsibility. That hey, if it's the weather's really bad outside, you may want to pay attention. This is just another way to let people know that could be an issue. This is not the end all. This is not like you get this and immediately run to the basement. That's not what that's intended for. It's just another way to communicate that there's bad weather. A tornado could affect you. You need to go figure out where you're at and how you're affected.
All right, so we've got time for about one or two more questions. Next one concerns the text-to-speech module. Question is, you mentioned special technology to add pauses between phrases. Is this limited to only outdoor PA, or does it impact indoor voice-to-speech messages as well?
We'll let Blake answer that.
Well, so you generally wouldn't use it on indoor. So on indoor, you don't have the it's not as loud, so there's not as much echo, so you don't need to. So you can speak a little more naturally.
Blake, there's not as much open space. I think that's really what causes that big reverb. But go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Not as much open space. There you go. So you could turn it on. It's a software setting that we kind of set for you as when we ship the unit out, but it's not needed. So generally, you wouldn't have that on. It would just speak slower. I mean, just more naturally without the pauses.
So we've got one more question. Are there options that notifications are sent out via Twitter or just text capabilities?
Yeah, so currently we have social media tied in through Everbridge. So if the message goes out and we include Everbridge in the recipe, then we can push out to Facebook or Twitter. Currently, they're just tied to the emergency management Facebook and Twitter feeds. But we're looking at in the future of maybe using also the main university Twitter and Facebook.
And Jamie, yeah, that goes right back to what we had commented earlier, which is at any one moment that we look at our system, that's a slice in time for that moment. We're always looking at new technologies and how are they going to be effective means to communicate, and if so, how do we integrate them in? So it's an ongoing process. The way we look now is not the way we looked a year ago, which is not going to be the way we look a year from now.
And just to clarify too, back in 2011 we didn't have the ability to post to Twitter and Facebook, but since then we have. They already had their Twitter and Facebook feeds set up through Everbridge, so they're just continuing to use them. But if you did want to use Alertus to post directly to Twitter and Facebook, you can do so.
Great. Well, that concludes our webinar session. I wanted to thank everybody for joining. Again, just a reminder, if you're interested in the presentation slides or a link to the video, just send your email to marketing@alertus.com. We can also answer any product-related questions. If you had any questions we didn't get to today, we'll follow up with you. If you find you have questions after the webinar, just shoot us an email and we'll be sure to answer any questions you may have. Also, just wanted to note that we do have several upcoming Alertus webinars. Our next webinar is on the 23rd of this month. It's going to be a product overview. It's going to provide a nice overview of the Alertus system, the various products that we have, a lot of the same stuff that Matt and Mark talked about today, but a little bit more in depth in terms of how they work together and the different options that are available there. We also have a webinar on October the 7th. It's going to be our healthcare segment, best practices from various participants and organizations in the healthcare industry. Finally, we have a webinar coming up on October the 21st, another product overview webinar that will focus specifically on the integrated phone app that we discussed today. So thanks again for joining. Hope to see you at some of the future webinars. And thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.